Hello, everyone. Welcome to SpeakNest English Podcast Zone. You're listening to episode 48, and today's topic is something that everyone enjoys: hobbies and free time activities. Whether you love dancing, painting, reading, or watching movies, this episode will help you talk about your hobbies in English with confidence. Let's get started.
Okay, so let's get started. Today we're doing a deep dive, looking closely at these notes you shared about hobbies, free time activities, that sort of thing.
That's right. And the idea, our sort of mission here, is to really unpack what these notes are telling us. What's the actual value? Is it, more than just filling up spare hours?
Yeah, exactly. Because the notes really frame hobbies as, well, much more important than just time pass. They definitely lean into the positive side.
They do. And they're pretty direct. The notes just come out and say, hobbies bring joy. Simple as that sounds, finding something just purely enjoyable, that's a big deal.
It really is, isn't it? Finding that space just for, well, pleasure. And it's not just joy, the notes also hit on stress reduction.
Right. Reducing stress. Which, let's face it, in today's world, anything that helps with that is pretty valuable. A real escape.
Totally. An escape that actually helps you unwind. Now, what I found fascinating was the connection drawn to creativity. The notes suggest hobbies actually make you more creative.
That's a key point in there. It's not always the first thing people think of, How does painting or gardening or whatever boost creativity elsewhere?
Well, maybe it's like exercising a different part of your brain. Or just giving your mind that space to wander and connect things differently.
Could be. That shift in focus, learning a new skill, seeing things from a different angle through the hobby, I can see how that might spill over.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It changes your perspective, maybe.
And that idea links straight into another point from the notes: making time for it. If these things bring joy, cut stress, boost creativity, well, shouldn't we prioritize them?
Right. Even when things feel crazy busy, the notes really push that, saying, take that time for yourself. Do what you love.
And crucially, talk about it. Don't just do it quietly.
Yes. That talking point leads to maybe the most specific insight here. The notes suggest learning English, for example, actually gets easier when you talk about stuff you're passionate about.
Which often means your hobbies. That's such a powerful connection. It suggests language learning isn't just rote memorization. It's about engagement, personal relevance.
Yeah, talking about something you genuinely care about, your photography maybe, or coding, or baking. It makes the language feel more alive, right? Helps it stick.
Makes total sense. You're using it in a context that actually means something to you.
So if we pull all this together from the notes, hobbies aren't trivial. They're tools, really, for joy, for less stress, for more creativity.
Important enough that they deserve kind of protected time on the calendar.
Absolutely. They're vital for well-being, according to these notes.
And that specific bit about learning, talking about passions, makes learning easier. That suggests the benefits ripple outwards, way beyond just the hobby itself.
So for you listening, the takeaway from these notes seems pretty clear. Find time for what brings you joy and cuts down stress. It might just spark your creativity, too.
And think about that link. If talking about what you love smooths the path for something challenging, like learning a language.
What does that tell you about how fundamentally important it is to figure out what those passions are and really embrace them in your life? Something to consider. Okay, let's kick things off. Today's deep dive. It's all about talking about something, you love your hobbies, what you do in your free time.
Right, fun stuff.
Exactly. And you sent us a whole bunch of sources on this. And, well, our mission here is simple. Pull out the really useful bits so you can talk about your passions easily, like genuinely.
And what's interesting, I think, is how these sources pretty much immediately cut to the chase. They stress that you don't need fancy language.
No, not at all.
Just simple ways to share something you enjoy. It's all about being direct.
Yeah, that directness is key. The main idea, like the core thing we found across the board, it's actually surprisingly simple. It's that simple sentence structures are, well, they're basically your best friend when talking about hobbies.
Right. Keep it simple.
Yeah, and it's not about sounding basic or anything. The sources link it more to being, clear, confident, authentic even.
Authentic. That makes sense.
So the sources gave some really good examples. Very clear. Let me read a few. Just listen to how straightforward they are. I like reading novels. Simple. My hobby is playing football.
Okay.
In my free time, I enjoy painting.
Yep.
I love listening to classical music.
Got it.
And on weekends, I go hiking.
See, what strikes me there is how little fluff there is.
Exactly.
They just use common words, common structures, and if you think bigger picture, the sources seem to say this kind of clarity. It doesn't just get the message across faster.
Right.
It actually makes you seem more approachable, easier to connect with, which kind of makes you wonder, like, are we sometimes making things way harder than they need to be?
Totally.
Yeah.
Why complicate it if simple works?
Yeah.
Especially for just, sharing something you like. And building on that, the sources had a really practical tip, like really useful.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just knowing about these sentences. It's about making them feel like yours.
Okay.
Simple. Say them out loud. Repeat them. Just practice until they kind of roll off your tongue naturally.
Ah, right. That's actually a crucial point, isn't it? Because it takes it from just like reading it on a page to actually using it.
Exactly.
Even simple stuff can feel a bit awkward at first if you're not used to saying it. So practicing helps you share without that hesitation.
Yeah, no awkward pauses where you're searching for the words.
Right. It's about confidently sharing that bit of who you are. That's the goal, really.
It really is. It brings it back to you, the listener, and making that moment when you share what you're into feel, well, effortless. You've got these tools now pulled right from the material you sent. They kind of cut through all the potential complexity.
Yeah, straight to the point.
It's right to the heart of your passion.
So if we zoom out a bit, being able to just clearly say what you enjoy doing, that's like a fundamental way we connect with people, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Sharing our interests, finding common ground, talking about what brings us joy, it starts there.
It really does. It's often that first little step, finding your tribe or just, sharing a genuine slice of your life. Okay, so let's wrap this up with something for you to maybe mull over. After digging into all this,
Yeah.
what's one simple sentence right now that you could use to share one of your hobbies, something you love?
Good question.
Just pick one. Maybe say it to yourself once or twice. Get it ready. You never know when you might want to share it.
Okay, today we're jumping right into your shared sources. The focus is hobbies and free time activities. Pretty universal stuff. Our mission, as always, is to cut through things a bit and quickly get you informed on the key points, the vocabulary, the prompts in the material you've provided us with. It seems like a simple topic, but I'm actually quite interested to see how your sources frame it.
Yeah, exactly. Because, hobbies might seem straightforward, like just what people do for fun, but looking at how people spend that free time and how it's presented, well, it can give some surprisingly interesting angles, which your sources definitely start to hint at.
Okay, right. So let's unpack the first bit from the material you shared. It's basically a list of common hobbies, just lays out some popular activities. Let me read them out here. Reading books, playing guitar, painting, cooking, watching movies, listening to music, playing sports.
Wide range already.
Yeah, and gardening, writing stories, learning languages. So, quite a few there. Just, looking at that list. It's quite a spectrum, isn't it? You've got the quiet, maybe more inward-looking things like reading or writing stories.
Right.
And then the more active, maybe skill-based ones, like playing guitar or sports.
Or gardening even. Needs some effort.
True. It seems to hit a lot of different ways people might find, I don't know, enjoyment or just relaxation.
Yeah, and what's kind of fascinating there, just looking at the list itself, is the implied type of engagement. Some are, let's say, about consumption, right?
Yeah.
Watching, listening, reading, taking things in.
Okay.
While others are definitely about creation or developing a skill, like playing an instrument, painting, writing, cooking even.
Right, making something.
Exactly. And then you got things like sports, which might be more communal maybe, contrasting with some of the more solitary ones on the list. So it's a neat little snapshot from your source of common ways people fill that non-work time.
It really gives you a feel for the landscape, yeah. But, okay, your sources don't just stop there with this list. They immediately kind of pivot the focus directly onto you, the listener. There's a very specific question. The material asks you, point blank, what is your hobby? Think in English.
Right. And this is where it gets, I think, particularly interesting. If you connect this back, you've got this general list, this pool of possibilities we just talked about. And then, bam, you're immediately prompted to identify your personal connection, your own activity. So it suggests the source isn't just, listing vocabulary. It's framed as a direct invitation, a prompt for self-reflection, really, based on this material.
And that framing, the specific wording is important, isn't it? It's not just what's your hobby. It adds that extra bit. Think in English.
Precisely. That's the key constraint, isn't it? The material doesn't just ask for the content of the answer, it actually specifies the language framework, the tool you should use to even formulate that thought about your own leisure time.
Okay, so let's recap just based on what you shared. We saw this broad list, common hobbies, giving a sense of the different possibilities.
Right, the general landscape.
Then the focus shifts very quickly, very personally, to you with what is your hobby? But with that specific instruction attached, think in English.
Yes. It definitely moves from the general out there to the very specific internal and personal, and adds that condition for how you should process that personal thought.
So maybe here's a final thought for you to consider, drawing only from this structure in the sources. What does it actually imply that your material presents these common activities and then immediately asks you to pinpoint your own personal hobby, but specifically using English to frame that thought? It feels like more than just, say, language practice. It seems the source is suggesting a deliberate link, doesn't it? A link between maybe personal identity, how you spend your free time, and the act of processing that through a specific language. How does thinking about something personal, like your hobby, through that specific lens of English, how might that change the reflection itself?
Yeah, it certainly encourages a different sort of engagement.
Yeah.
With both the hobby and the language, potentially.
Absolutely fascinating stuff to think about. Okay, that's our deep dive for today. Let's dive into something that looks really simple on the surface today. We're looking at how really basic questions, stuff about hobbies or free time, how they can actually unlock really engaging conversations.
Yeah, it sounds almost too obvious to be worth analyzing, doesn't it?
Exactly. But the source material we're digging into, it's this very short interaction, super brief, and it perfectly highlights why this simple method works so well, why it feels, natural.
So our mission here is basically to unpack this little example. It's
Right.
not just what they ask, but the structure, the flow it creates, how it actually functions.
We want to see how this casual chat works on maybe a deeper level.
Okay, so the interaction in our source, it kicks off with that classic super low stakes question. What do you do in your free time?
Right, a question pretty much anyone can answer. And it immediately shows you're interested in the person, not just, their job or something immediate.
Yeah, and the answer in the source is just as simple. Something like, I usually read books or watch documentaries.
Okay, so specific things offered up there, reading documentaries.
Exactly. It's not vague like, oh, I relax.
Yeah.
It gives you something concrete.
And then importantly, the interaction shows the question gets tossed back. What about you?
And the reply is, I enjoy cooking and trying new recipes. Again, clear, specific interest. No ambiguity.
Now here's the bit the source really highlights. The pivot. How to move beyond just, trading facts.
Right.
The follow-up isn't just, oh, cool, and then silence or changing the subject. It's specific. That's great. What kind of food do you like to cook?
And that is where the real conversation, the sort of mini deep dive, begins.
Yeah.
All from that simple follow-up.
Yeah.
They didn't just acknowledge the word cooking. They, latched onto it and asked for more detail.
And that really is the core insight from this little example, isn't it? The pattern.
What pattern is that?
It's asking a broad, easy question first.
Okay.
Getting a reply with a specific detail.
Like reading or cooking.
Exactly. And then immediately asking a follow-up question about that specific detail.
What's interesting, that there isn't just the mechanics, it's also the psychology behind it.
Oh, so?
Well, when you ask about that specific thing, someone shared what kind of food, what are you reading? You're doing a few things at once, actually.
Yeah.
You're showing you heard them, really heard them. You're validating their answer.
Makes sense.
And you're inviting them to talk more about something they chose to mention, something they're probably interested in.
Yeah, it feels way less like you're just ticking boxes in a conversation, or worse, interrogating them. It's more like building something together. They offered a little piece, cooking, and you showed real curiosity about that piece.
It's like they hand you a thread, and you just give it a gentle pull.
I like that analogy, pulling the thread.
And this points to maybe why some conversations just fizzle out,
Yeah.
People ask the first question, they get an answer like, I read. But then they just jump somewhere else. They leave that thread just hanging there.
Okay. So the source model shows the power is in tugging on that specific thread they gave you.
It's like a really subtle conversational version of following the clues, maybe.
Yeah.
Following the information they offer.
Yeah, information foraging, but for conversation. I like that.
So what can you, the listener, take away from this brief example?
Well, it seems to suggest that building connection, it isn't always about having the perfect witty line or some obscure knowledge.
Right.
It's often about mastering this really simple art. Ask about interests, listen for the specifics, and then ask about those specifics.
It's fundamental, really.
We definitely encourage you to, watch out for this pattern, notice it in conversations you have, or even ones you just overhear.
See when it works, when that flow happens because someone followed up specifically.
And notice when conversations maybe stall because that follow-up didn't happen.
It's a basic building block.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's something to maybe mull over after this deep dive.
Hmm.
If focusing on asking about the specific detail someone shares, just after a broad opening question, if that simple shift can unlock more natural, engaging conversations, well, how much connection potential are we maybe leaving on the table by not paying close attention to that simple structure?
Okay, let's dive in. We've got this set of practice sentences here. They all seem pretty simple, focused on, hobbies and free time stuff.
Right, they look basic. But what's really interesting, I think, is looking under the surface. Our mission today is sort of to unpack what these simple phrases actually show us about, well, how we talk about our interests.
And how that simple act can be, maybe surprisingly, a big deal for connecting with people.
Exactly. It's more than just stating facts.
So the source gives us examples like, my hobby is drawing cartoons. Pretty direct.
Yeah. Or shifting slightly to, in my free time, I enjoy playing badminton.
We also get, I love learning new languages, which feels a bit more intense than enjoy.
And then there's context added, like on Sundays, I go cycling in the park. Very specific.
And even looking back in time, when I was younger, I loved sketching.
So if we dig into the structure just a bit, my hobby is drawing cartoons that uses a gerund drawing, almost like an equal sign, hobby drawing.
Defines it.
Right. But then I enjoy playing, or I love learning. That's different. The verb enjoy or love comes first, and the activity is the object.
Ah, so it's less about definition and more about your feeling towards it. Expressing preference, maybe?
Precisely. It's subtle, isn't it? Are you defining a part of yourself or sharing something that brings you pleasure?
That distinction feels important. It changes the flavor of how you present your interest.
Totally. And look on Sundays, I go cycling. That go plus ing structure is really common for recreational things, often tied to a time.
Yeah, like go swimming, go hiking. It implies a regular activity.
Mm-hmm. And the past tense one, I loved sketching. That opens up a whole different conversation, doesn't it? About how interests change, maybe personal history.
So for you listening, this isn't just about memorizing phrases, right? It's about understanding the actual mechanics of talking about yourself.
Yes. And why does understanding these different ways matter?
Well, being able to say what you do outside of the daily grind, it's kind of a fundamental way we show who we are, find common ground.
It's like a little invitation, isn't it? A low-stakes way to share something personal. These sentences are like social lubricants.
Lubricants, I like that.
Yeah.
They move us past the basic how are you stuff.
Exactly. If you say, I love learning languages, you're not just stating an activity. It implies something more, right? Maybe curiosity, maybe dedication.
A desire to connect with other cultures, perhaps?
Yeah. Or on Sundays, I go cycling. That suggests maybe routine, maybe like being outdoors, fitness. The activity itself carries weight.
And the structure frames that weight.
Yeah.
It also gives someone an easy way to jump in, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's like built-in conversation starters. Oh, languages. Which ones?
Or cycling. Where do you usually go? They provide these little hooks.
So mastering these patterns means you're getting good at providing those hooks yourself, deliberately.
Makes sense. And the examples cover quite a range. You've got artistic stuff like drawing, sketching.
Active things like badminton, cycling.
And the intellectual side with language learning.
So by practicing these, you're not just learning sentences. You're internalizing these basic social and grammatical ways to talk about interests in English.
And the key thing, I think, is once you grasp these basic structures, my hobby is X, I enjoy Ying, I go Z on.
You have the framework. You can plug in your own passions, whatever they are.
No matter how unique or niche. And you can create a clear statement that, well, invites connection.
It's using simple tools to build something really personal, a little window into who you are.
So maybe something to think about as you go about your day. When you describe your hobby, it's never just naming an activity, is it?
No, you're choosing specific ways to phrase it, revealing something about how you see it and maybe how you want others to see you.
And maybe the most powerful bit is you're opening a door, inviting someone else to share a piece of their identity too.
So the final thought maybe is, What does the way you talk about your hobbies, the words you choose, the structure you use, what does that communicate even before the follow-up questions start? Worth considering.
Today we're looking at a source that really dives into how we talk about our free time, our hobbies, and our mission for this deep dive. It's really to unpack one specific idea from this material. How talking about the timeline of your hobbies can actually make your language way more engaging.
Yeah, it's interesting. The source focuses specifically on like things you used to do or maybe things you want to learn down the line.
Right. And what's so powerful, I think, is how simple the core idea is. But it adds so much depth.
It really does. It shifts things from just, okay, I do this now, to telling more of a story. You don't just have the hobby. You've got a history with it, maybe a future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the source points out that using different tenses, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, well, that's fundamental here.
It's not just, ticking grammar boxes. It's about building a kind of narrative for your interests.
Yeah. And this is where the source suggests it gets really interesting for how you communicate.
Right. Because by bringing in those past experiences or future plans, your English naturally becomes more dynamic. It just does.
Dynamic, yeah. How so?
Well, it adds layers, right? You move beyond just a flat description of what you're doing now. It creates contrast, it can show growth, signal what you're aspiring to. It adds dimension.
Dimension, I like that. The source gives some great examples, too. It makes it really concrete. Like, for talking about the past, it has something like, I used to collect coins when I was a child.
Yeah, and see how that immediately opens things up. It tells a little story.
A window into your past, who you were, maybe hints at why you stopped or started something else.
And it's instantly more conversational, isn't it? It invites questions. Oh, really? Do you still have them? Why'd you stop?
Yeah.
Much better than just saying, I don't collect coins.
Totally. Then looking ahead, the source gives this other example. I'm planning to learn photography next month.
And that shows intention, goal setting. It's forward-looking.
Right. Signals a developing interest. Something's happening.
And that future focus, it lets other people connect with your ambitions. Maybe they offer tips or share their own story about learning photography. It starts a different kind of conversation.
Definitely. There's also another past example in there, slightly different. Last year, I started running every morning.
Ah, yes. That uses the simple past. Not used to.
Right. So it suggests something that began in the past. Maybe it's still going on. It shows a decision, a change.
Exactly. And it shows how even small grammatical choices, like used to versus simple past, can subtly change the meaning when you're talking about something personal like hobbies. One implies discontinued, the other initiated. It adds nuance.
It really does. It paints a clearer picture of your journey with that activity. Commitment, maybe, or a new phase.
Yeah. What's so neat about this whole takeaway from the source is how these simple tense structures let you share not just the what now, but the whole timeline.
The history, the evolution, the future possibility. It makes your description feel, alive.
Alive with experience and anticipation, yeah.
Which brings us to a really important question for you, the listener.
How can you use these ideas? Thinking about the before and the after of your hobbies, how can that help you share a more complete, more dynamic picture of something you love doing?
Right. How do you unlock those hidden stories in your own activities?
So, what's the bottom line here?
Well, I think it means that when you talk about your hobbies, just shifting your perspective a bit, thinking about what you used to do, what you plan to do, it gives you this really powerful but simple tool.
A tool to make your language more engaging, more dynamic, just like the source says. Adds that dimension we talked about.
Exactly, dimension.
So maybe a final thought for you to consider, building on this deep dive. Beyond just making your English sound more dynamic, what new connections could you actually make with people? By sharing not just your current hobby, but the path you took and where you dream of going with it. What simple tense could help you tell that story? Today, we're taking a close look at just one source.
Yeah, just one. And it's focused on something we all do or could do more of, talking about hobbies. Free time stuff.
Exactly. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Just casual chat.
But this source, well, it argues that talking about your hobbies actually has some, real practical benefits.
Right. So our mission here is to pull out those key insights. Why does this source say discussing your hobbies is, well, good for you?
It's not just filler conversation, according to this material. It actually does things.
Okay, so let's get into the first one. The source states pretty clearly that talking about hobbies helps you make new friends.
Yeah, and the idea seems to be It's about shared interest, right? When you talk about what you genuinely love doing.
You put it out there.
Exactly. You signal what you care about. And that makes it easier for, like, kindred spirits to find you.
Or for you to find them. It gives you that instant common ground.
Right, which kind of flows into the second point the source makes, which helping with small talk, starting those initial conversations.
Yeah, breaking the ice. That can be tricky sometimes.
Totally. And this source suggests, well, your hobbies are kind of a perfect go-to topic.
Because you know it well.
Yeah, you know it, you're probably enthusiastic about it, and it's usually, safe territory, not controversial.
So it gives you a reliable starting point.
Okay, a familiar path, like you said earlier.
And then the source broadens out a bit. It says, talking about hobbies is also a way of showing your personality.
Right, not just in casual chats, but maybe even in, say, an interview context.
Interesting. How so?
Well, the material suggests that how you talk about it, the passion, maybe the challenges you overcame, the details, it reveals things like maybe you're creative or disciplined or patient. It adds another layer to who you are.
Gives a fuller picture beyond just, I don't know, your job title or basic facts.
Exactly. A more authentic glimpse.
Okay, this next one highlighted by the source is quite specific, and I think particularly relevant for maybe some of our listeners. The fourth benefit mentioned is that it helps you feel more comfortable in English conversations.
Yeah, that focus on English is interesting, isn't it?
It is. What's the thinking there, according to the text?
Well, the idea seems to be that it's a topic you actually care about. You've probably thought about it, maybe even looked things up in English related to it.
So you have some vocabulary already.
Right. You have a bit of a foundation. And because you're talking about something you enjoy, maybe you relax a bit more about, like, perfect grammar.
And that builds confidence, makes the language feel more natural.
Yeah, less like a test, more like just sharing.
Okay, so let's sort of recap what this source is telling us.
Sure.
It's saying this simple act, talking about hobbies, isn't trivial at all. It suggests clear benefits.
First, making friends, finding that connection.
Second, easing into small talk, having that reliable starter.
Third, showing your personality, offering that deeper glimpse.
And fourth, specifically, building comfort and confidence in English conversations.
Yeah, it really paints it as a kind of multi-purpose tool for connection and communication. Based entirely on this one source, of course.
Absolutely, all drawn from this specific material.
Yeah.
So thinking about these different advantages the source points out, connecting with people, starting conversations, expressing yourself, even language comfort. Which of those potential results resonates most strongly with you personally right now? And, maybe reflecting on that, could it encourage you to share your own passions a little more openly?
Into your source material today.
Great to be here.
And today, we're really digging into something, well, it seems basic, but it's actually pretty impactful. It's about using conversation, specific questions to connect with people.
Yeah, asking about what they actually like doing, their free time, hobbies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the source gives us some really practical stuff here. Right. Useful phrases for asking about this very topic.
And our mission really is just to pull out the best bits, the most useful insights from what you've provided to help you actually use these ideas to, well, build connections.
And right off the bat, the big takeaway seems to be these ready-to-go phrases. The source literally gives you the words to use.
It does, yeah. No need to overthink it sometimes. It lists, what do you like to do in your free time? That's one.
Okay. Standard enough.
Then, do you have any hobbies? Pretty direct. Also, how do you spend your weekends? A bit more specific, maybe.
Right. Gets into the rhythm of their life a little.
And finally, what's your favorite way to relax? Which is slightly different, again. More about unwinding.
Interesting. 4 simple questions. But the source makes a point about why they work, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It says explicitly these are great ways, great tools for making new friends.
And why is that exactly? What's the thinking there?
Well, it's about what these questions signal. They immediately show you're interested in the person, not just like the situation you're in.
Okay. So it's moving beyond just the surface level, the task at hand, or whatever.
Precisely. You're asking about their life outside of that context, their passions, what they genuinely enjoy, or how they recharge. It's personal.
Kind of like saying, hey, I see you as a whole person.
Exactly. And that recognition, that curiosity about them, well, the source suggests that's foundational for building rapport, for building trust.
Makes sense. It's not just data collection.
Not at all. It's connection building. You value them as an individual, and finding that common ground, or even just appreciating their unique interest, that makes the interaction stick. It moves it past forgettable small talk.
Right. Okay, so quick recap then. The source gives us those 4 specific phrases.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like to do in your free time? Do you have any hobbies?
Mm-hmm.
How do you spend your weekends?
Mm-hmm.
And what's your favorite way to relax?
Yep. And the core idea, the real insight here, is that using these isn't just polite chat. It's an active step towards making friends because you're showing genuine interest.
It seems so simple, but maybe easily overlooked.
I think so.
Yeah.
In our busy lives, maybe we forget the power of just, well, asking and listening.
So using this language from the source isn't really about mapping out someone's schedule.
No, it's about reaching out, showing that authentic curiosity, building a little bridge with that conversation.
It's how you find those shared interests or just learn something cool about someone that makes them, more real, more connectable.
Definitely. Which brings us to a final thought, something for you to maybe chew on.
Okay.
Think about this. What if you learn just one small detail about someone's hobby? Something maybe a bit unexpected. Let's say they, collect vintage lunchboxes, or they're secretly amazing at speed Jenga, whatever it is.
Yeah.
How might discovering that one thing, that little glimpse into their personal world, actually change how you see them or how you talk to them next time?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Think about those surprising connections, those conversations that could spark just because you asked what they do for fun. It could open up whole new avenues you'd never expect.
So have you ever found yourself, trying to talk about something you really love, maybe a hobby, right? Something you do in your free time, and the conversation just sort of falls flat?
Yeah. Or maybe you're on the listening end and someone's telling you about their passion, but it feels a bit, general.
Exactly that.
That's pretty much the territory we're digging into today. We've been looking over the material you shared, focusing specifically on how people talk about hobbies and free time.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive, really pulling from your sources, is to maybe figure out how we make those conversations genuinely engaging.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about saying what you do. It feels like it's about unlocking, a deeper connection.
That's it, exactly. The core idea that really jumped out from the sources you gave us is that just like identifying your interest, it isn't quite enough.
Okay.
To make it interesting for someone else and, probably more satisfying for you too, you need to add some dimension.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this a bit. The material you sent drew a really clear contrast.
It did.
Like on one side, you've got just a basic statement. Let's use their example. I like music.
Okay. Which, let's be honest, could apply to almost anyone, right?
Fancy.
It's true, sure. But as the sources point out, it gives the other person almost nothing specific to latch onto.
Right. It's like a dead end conversationally.
Yeah, basically.
And this is where the sources really highlight the power of adding details.
Mm-hmm.
Adding those specifics is what turns that kind of generic fact into something personal, something that, invites a response.
And what's interesting is how the sources actually show this. So instead of that super broad, I like music, they suggest adding layers.
Okay, like what?
Well, the example they give is, I like listening to old jazz music when I relax in the evening.
Oh, okay. See, that feels totally different, doesn't it?
Right.
Suddenly you've got the type of music, old jazz, that immediately tells you something about their taste.
Yeah.
Then you have the when in the evening.
Yeah.
And the context. Or maybe the feeling when I relax.
Precisely. And the sources really emphasize that these details, they might seem small, but they act like hooks.
Hooks.
Yeah, someone hearing that might think, oh, I like jazz too. Or, evenings are when I relax. Maybe I should try some jazz. Or even just, what kind of old jazz? It just, opens doors.
Yeah, it gives multiple paths forward. And it's not just about music, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sources had another example, more active.
That's right. Instead of just, I play piano, which, again, it's factual, but kind of flat, they suggested something more like, I play the piano for 30 minutes every day.
Right. Okay, so now you know it's a specific activity piano.
Yeah.
You know the duration, 30 minutes, and the frequency every single day.
It just paints a much clearer picture, doesn't it, of what that hobby actually looks like in someone's life.
Definitely.
And the power this gives you, the person talking, according to the sources anyway, is pretty big.
How so?
Well, you're not just stating a fact about yourself. You're sort of offering a window. You're providing these specific data points, really, that make it incredibly easy for the other person to ask a relevant question or find common ground or just understand why you love it.
So it makes the whole conversation about your passion feel more, real, connectable.
Exactly. Much more connectable.
Okay. So bring it all together then. The key takeaway, really distilled from your material, it seems pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about your hobbies, your free time stuff, don't just stop at the headline.
Mm-hmm. don't stop there.
The specific details, the what type, the when, the how often, the context, that's what unlocks the really interesting, engaging conversations.
Yeah. And this brings up an important question for you, the listener, to maybe think about, reflecting on the sources we looked at.
Okay.
Think about the hobbies and activities you love. How do you normally describe them? Just, day to day. Now, try applying this perspective, this idea from the material.
Yeah.
Think about the specific when, the how, the what specific type that applies to your own passions. How does just thinking about those details maybe to change the story you could tell about them next time? Something to consider.
That's all for episode 48 of SpeakNest English Podcast Zone. Now you can confidently talk about your hobbies and free time activities in English. In the next episode, we'll explore how to talk about your family in English, a warm and personal topic for everyone. Keep listening, keep learning, and always keep growing. See you soon.